Mom said. "You're a bad influence on your brother," and told me to leave. I said sure, packed my bags and flew first class to my new luxury penthouse. Then she called crying. It started with a dinner. Just one of those casual Sunday things that Mom insists on even though they always end in tension. My brother Derek had just lost another job, his third in 2 years, and somehow, it was my fault. Again. We were sitting around the table. Mom had made her famous pot roast, the one she knows I hate. But that's tradition for you, she sets the table with expectations and guilt. Derek slouched in his chair, fiddling with his phone while I tried to keep the small talk alive. I asked about his job search, gently, respectfully. That's when he rolled his eyes and muttered, "It's hard out here, not everyone gets lucky like you." Lucky. That's what he calls the 15-hour days I put in building my own business from scratch. Lucky is the term he uses for the fact that I now live in a top-floor penthouse overlooking the skyline, while he sleeps till noon in Mom's basement. I didn't react. I'd learned long ago that reacting gave them ammo. But then Mom chimed in, soft but sharp. "I think your success has made you arrogant. You forget where you came from." Where I came from? I paid for her mortgage when Dad died. I covered Derek's rehab. I bailed him out of more messes than I could count. But that didn't matter. None of it ever did. And when I pointed out, calmly, not even raising my voice, that maybe, just maybe, Derek's problems were his own, she exploded. "You're a bad influence on your brother," she shouted, her eyes brimming with tears that weren't for me. "I think you should leave." That was it. No yelling. No argument. I just stood up, tucked in my chair, and nodded. "Sure," I said. "If that's what you want." I kissed her on the cheek. Derek sneered like he'd won something. I walked out to my rented black car, rolled up the windows, and told the driver to take me straight to the airport. By midnight, I was sipping champagne at 38,000 feet, flying first class back to the city where people respected me, not for who I used to be, but for what I'd built. And for the first time in years I felt light. Like I'd finally left something heavy behind. It was strange how quiet things became after that. No dramatic texts. No frantic voicemails. Just silence. You'd think being called a bad influence and banished would stir up more chaos, but for the next few days, it was as if I'd never existed. And oddly, it didn't sting. Not the way I thought it would. It felt like proof, undeniable proof, that I'd never really been part of that family, not the way Derek was. I got back to my place in Manhattan. A sun-drenched, high-ceilinged corner penthouse with a terrace big enough to host a wedding. It was spotless. My housekeeper had been by. The fridge was stocked. The scent of fresh eucalyptus floated through the air. But even with the peace, my mind wandered. Not with guilt, no, I'd shaken that habit. It was curiosity. Because I knew Derek. And I knew something was brewing. He wasn't the kind to coast without drama for long. And if Mom had really believed kicking me out would fix him, she was in for a rude awakening. The first clue came a week later. A mutual friend of Derek's, Ben, messaged me out of nowhere. "Hey man. Not sure if you've heard, but Derek's in some stuff. Big stuff." That's all he said. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just sat there on my terrace, watching the city lights flicker to life, sipping aged whiskey and waiting. Waiting for the moment they'd realize just how much I'd been holding everything together, quietly, constantly, without thanks. And that moment? It was coming. The call came late on a Thursday. I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize, and I was halfway through a tasting menu dinner with a client at a rooftop restaurant in Tribeca. But something told me to pick up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end cracked. "Evan?" It was my mother. There was no warmth in her tone. No. "Hi, honey." Just a hollow, urgent edge that set my teeth on edge. "We need to talk." "It's Derek." I stepped away from the table, leaned on the balcony railing, and waited. She didn't wait for permission. "He's gotten himself into trouble. Real trouble. There's debt. Credit cards maxed out. He told me he was investing, but I think..." She paused, her voice trembling. I think it might be worse than that. There's talk about some legal stuff. Something with stolen money. I said nothing. Just let her fill the silence. I thought he was doing better, she whispered, almost to herself. I thought, after you left, he'd step up. My stomach turned, not out of sympathy, but from the sheer audacity of it all. After I left? She made it sound like I abandoned them. Like I hadn't been pushed out, labeled a disease and told to go. Her voice dropped. Evan, I don't know who else to call. That was the moment. The moment I realized I wasn't the bad influence. I was the backbone. And the minute I stepped away, the whole illusion collapsed. It was satisfying in the way a final puzzle piece clicks into place. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just said, I hope you figure it out. And hung up. The city sparkled below me. Somewhere down there, people were making bad decisions and blaming the wrong people for them. But I wasn't one of them anymore. 3 days passed. Then came the texts. Long, pleading messages from my mother. Some apologetic. Most desperate. Evan, please, just talk to Derek. He listens to you. He's scared. He made some mistakes, but he needs help. And then the ones that cut a little deeper, even if they didn't mean to. I know you're angry. But you're stronger than this. He's not. Stronger. That word. It was always their excuse. Their justification for why I had to carry more, fix more, give more. Because I could. I sat in my penthouse one night reading those texts, surrounded by everything I'd earned, the art on the walls, the glass wine cellar in the corner, the city skyline wrapping around me like armor, and felt nothing but clarity. They didn't love me more. They needed me more. And they couldn't see the difference. I opened a new message window, typed, I can't help you, and hit send. Seconds later, my phone rang. I ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. And then, it stopped. I poured myself a glass of wine, turned off my phone, and sat by the window. Let them feel it. The silence. The absence of their scapegoat. Let them sit in the mess they made, without the bad influence. They thought they were better off without. I didn't hear from them for a week after that last message. No calls. No texts. Nothing. It was eerily familiar, this kind of Cold War standoff. But this time, the silence didn't hold me hostage. It set me free. Still, my thoughts drifted. I'd always carried a kind of guilt I couldn't name. I didn't rebel as a teenager, I just worked. I got scholarships, built a company out of my apartment at 24, grew it into something real while Derek coasted from one half-baked idea to another. And every time he failed, Mom would look at me like I was the reason. If you weren't always showing off, maybe Derek wouldn't feel so pressured. I used to believe that. That my success shamed him. That I was somehow responsible for his inability to move forward. So I compensated. I paid off his credit card bills. Helped with his student loans. Gave him a job once. He lasted 3 weeks. It took me years to realize I wasn't helping, I was enabling. I was giving him soft landings when what he needed were hard consequences. And now he had them. A mutual acquaintance from back home, Travis, texted me a few days later. Nothing dramatic, just a blunt update. Your brother's being investigated. Something about misusing client funds. He might be in real trouble this time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That night, I found myself in the study, staring at an old photo on the bookshelf. It was the 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Derek, and me, at some amusement park. I was 12. Derek was 7. We were both holding ice cream cones. I remember that day because I had saved my allowance for weeks to buy Derek a stuffed animal he wanted. He dropped it on the way to the car and cried the whole ride home. Mom told me I should have carried it for him. Even then, I was always the one expected to hold the burden. I picked up the photo, looked at my younger self, grinning, hopeful, unaware, and whispered, "You did enough." Then I set the photo face down and turned out the light. It was a rainy Tuesday when the call finally came, not a missed call or a voicemail, but a real, breathing moment where I picked up and said, "Hello?" knowing exactly who it was. "Evan," Mom said, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded old. There was a kind of rattling grief in her voice, the kind that comes when denial has finally worn off and there's no one left to blame. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't waste time on small talk. "He might go to jail," she said. "They're talking about embezzlement. I don't even know what that means exactly, but he's scared. I've never seen him like this." I stayed quiet. I could feel her fishing for softness, waiting for me to jump in with comfort, with solutions, like I always had. She went on, her voice cracking like she was chewing glass. "He's talking about leaving. Running. Like that would solve anything. Evan, he's not strong enough to face this alone. He needs you." Those last 3 words used to have power. "He needs you." They used to summon me like an obedient dog. Not anymore. I waited a moment, then spoke, slowly and clearly. "Mom, you made it clear, I'm a bad influence. Remember? You told me to leave." There was a pause, then a quiet, fragile sob. "I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," I said. "And I needed to hear it. Because that was the moment I realized I'd been holding this family together by force. By guilt. By habit. And none of you ever noticed. Or maybe you did, and you just didn't care." She didn't try to deny it. She didn't offer excuses. That surprised me. Instead, she said the quietest words I'd ever heard from her. "I don't know what to do without you." I leaned back in my leather chair, looking out at the gray city sky. That's not my problem anymore. It was the truth. Cold, maybe. But I wasn't trying to punish her, I was protecting myself. For once in my life, I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the fallback plan. I was just gone. She started to say something, but I stopped her. "I'm not coming back. I've moved on. I hope you both figure things out. But I won't be a part of it." Then I hung up. No dramatic goodbye. No final plea. Just a click. A full stop. For the rest of the evening, the phone stayed silent. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the kind that comes after resolution. The kind that comes after release. A week passed. Maybe 2. I didn't really count. Time started to feel different, looser, quieter, when you stopped expecting chaos. When you weren't waiting for the next guilt-laced call or subtle dig disguised as concern. I didn't hear from her again. Not after that last call. I kept expecting her to try one more time, maybe a tearful voicemail or a message saying Derek had changed, had apologized, had asked for me. But nothing came. That was how I knew she finally understood. I wasn't coming back. And something about that made me feel both completely free and deeply, deeply sad. Not because I missed them, but because I realized how long I had been hoping they would change. Hoping one day they'd see me for who I really was. Not the rebel, not the cautionary tale. Just me. But when you spend your whole life being cast in someone else's narrative, your best chance at peace is to stop auditioning. My life had space now. Beautiful, intentional space. I started doing things I hadn't made time for before: long walks in the park with my dog, dinners with people who respected me, afternoons where I turned my phone off just because I could. I took meetings that inspired me, passed on ones that didn't. I watched the sunset from my terrace and didn't feel like I had to earn it. And the penthouse, it became more than just a symbol of success. It became my sanctuary. High above the noise, the mess, the need to explain myself. I remember one night, standing barefoot in my living room, sipping a glass of wine, city lights painting golden streaks across the hardwood floors. Music playing soft in the background. No drama. No tension. I thought about Derek, what he was doing. If he was still unraveling, or if he'd finally hit the wall hard enough to learn. I didn't know. I didn't care to know. Because here's what they never taught me growing up: you can love someone and still walk away. You can wish them well and never speak to them again. You can forgive someone and still choose to live your life without them in it. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And for the first time, my life felt like mine. Fully, completely, and unapologetically mine. It was late autumn when I got the letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. Handwritten in trembling cursive on pale blue stationery I recognized instantly. My mother's, the kind she used to write grocery lists and birthday cards when I was a kid. I sat at the kitchen counter, the envelope unopened for nearly an hour. Just staring at it. Finally, I broke the seal. The first line was barely legible from where her hand had shaken. I know I've lost the right to ask for anything from you. The rest of it was an apology, but not the kind I was used to. Not the defensive, half-baked kind. It was honest. Raw. She told me things I didn't expect to hear. That she'd spent her whole life trying to keep the peace, and in doing so, she'd enabled Derek's chaos and erased me in the process. That she'd mistaken my strength for invincibility. That deep down, she always believed I'd survive whatever was thrown at me, and maybe that's why she never shielded me from any of it. And then, near the bottom, a line that stopped me cold. The house feels empty now. Not because Derek's gone, he's still here, in and out, lost. But because your silence has become louder than his shouting ever was. I had to put the letter down. That line, it wasn't just about now. It was about everything. Every time I swallowed my anger, every time I covered Derek's tracks, every time I sat at that dinner table biting my tongue while he made excuse after excuse, and she looked at me like I was the problem for calling him out. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city blinked below me. So full of life and motion, so far removed from the suffocating stillness of my childhood home. I remembered that house, its creaky floorboards, the smell of lemon cleaner and coffee. The way I'd sit on the stairs as a teenager, listening to my parents argue in whispers they thought I couldn't hear. The way I'd escape to the garage to work on projects, to feel in control of something, anything. I missed it. And I didn't. Because it wasn't the house I was grieving. It was the version of me that still hoped that house could become something it never was. Something safe. Something fair. Something whole. I took a deep breath and folded the letter. Placed it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't write back either. Because some things are better left on paper. And sometimes, the loudest answer you can give is stillness. It started with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Derek's missing. Please call. No punctuation. No signature. Just panic in digital ink. For a second, I felt that old reflex twitch in my chest. The need to jump into action, to fix things, to be the responsible one. But I let the phone sit face down on the marble countertop, untouched. I wasn't going to run, not anymore. Later that day, I checked my voicemail. There was one message. My mother's voice, brittle and breaking. He's gone. I don't know where. He left a note saying he needed time, that he was tired of disappointing everyone. Evan, if there's any part of you that still cares, please, just come home. Help me find him. I'm scared. I stood in the center of my apartment, surrounded by quiet luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows, glass wine rack glowing amber in the evening light, my curated art pieces humming with soft color. And I realized something terrifying and liberating at once. I didn't want to go back. Not even for her. Not even for him. Because home wasn't that crumbling house anymore. It wasn't a place full of memories and resentments and half-finished apologies. Home had become this place, this clean, quiet space I'd built with my own hands, brick by emotional brick. I poured a drink, sat on the terrace, and let the city breathe around me. Maybe Derek had run. Maybe he'd finally snapped. Maybe he was walking the edge of some cliff, metaphorical or not. But I couldn't help him. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned the hard way. You can't save someone who's still addicted to being rescued. And for all the guilt that tried to claw at me, I kept returning to one truth: he never had to become this. He was given 1,000 lifelines, and he mistook every one of them for a leash. Every gift became a burden. Every effort, a betrayal. So I didn't return her call. I didn't book a flight. I didn't even ask for details. I let the silence stretch between us like a canyon. Not out of cruelty, but because for the first time, I was choosing myself. And in that choice, I found something I never expected. Peace that didn't ask for permission. Months passed. No updates. No more desperate voicemails. No sudden knocks at my door. It was like the world finally accepted what I'd known the moment I walked out of that house. I was done playing savior. I never found out exactly what happened to Derek. Rumors filtered through. He was staying with some old friends, there was a minor arrest, some community service. Nothing catastrophic. But also, nothing redemptive. Just more of the same. Mom stopped calling. I think she finally realized I wouldn't be the emergency contact anymore. I had crossed a line, not one of rebellion, but one of rebirth. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making them pay. It was about living a life that no longer required their approval, or their chaos. There's a strange kind of peace in knowing the phone won't ring. In not flinching at the sound of a text. In walking through your home and knowing every inch of it belongs to you, not just in deed, but in spirit. I still think about that final dinner sometimes, the roast I never ate, the look on Derek's face when I didn't explode, the quiet satisfaction of calmly saying, "Sure," when Mom told me to leave. They thought they were cutting me off. What they didn't know was that I was already gone. Gone from the expectations. Gone from the guilt. Gone from the version of myself that needed their love like oxygen. And in that empty space, I found something better, self-respect. If you're listening to this, and any of it feels familiar, if you've been the backbone, the fixer, the one who holds everything together while everyone else falls apart, let me tell you something no one told me. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to walk away without explanation. And you are absolutely allowed to live a beautiful, fulfilled life even if the people who raised you never saw your worth. The best revenge isn't success. It's peace. And I live in it every single day.